Are you wondering how to prepare for retirement? If so, you're not alone. Been there and done that, although we sort of stumbled into early retirement, which I'll get into more in just a second. But what I've learned is the steps that we should have taken in the 5 years before retirement. And that's what I'm going to share with you in this video. Hi, I'm Camille Gaines here, and on my website, retirecertain.com, I write about and talk about my investing adventure over the past 40 years or so, as well as creating alternative and traditional income streams over the past 15 years or so after stumbling into early retirement. What I learned in hindsight is there are 7 things that you can do to help you transition into retirement to make it a lot easier. The very first thing is, away from the math and away from the numbers and all that, it's simply to step back and take a look at your life and clarify what it is that you want to have in your life for the remaining time that you're here on this earth, so that you can prioritize your expenses. We all have the expenses, right? But sometimes we lose track of what's really important to us. So step back from the math, step back from the numbers and worrying about the finances, and just simply clarify what it is important for you to either add to your life in retirement when you finally have time to do it, or to take away that is really not a priority when it comes to spending your money, your time, and your energy on these things. I can promise you, if you spend 5 minutes looking at this, it is going to change your perspective and give you some valuable insight that will affect your finances and the other things that you do. The next step is to look at all your expenses and really get super clear about how much money you're spending every single month. Make sure that you include in those monthly expenses your annual expenses that only come up once a year. Things like, for us, it's things like property taxes, it's holiday spending, it's a couple of vacations a year. Put all that together, divide it by 12, and see how much you're spending every year. I know that there are different buckets that are recommended for spending in this savings account for holiday or whatever. I just like to look and see how much is it costing us to sustain our current lifestyle on a monthly basis. Then I have a foundation for how much we need to make every month in order to sustain that lifestyle, and or then I'm going to tweak that amount for any changes that I want to make, anything that we want to make better. And that might be something that may be, again, taking away an expense or adding an expense. But that's the foundation that I want to work from, and I want to get super clear about that in the years leading up to retirement. Then the next step is to look at how much investment income I will have every month. Now, if you're working full-time, you may not be focused on investment income. So this is a really important step, because if you're focused on growth in the years that you have employment income, you may need to shift to assets that pay income, or investment assets instead. The problem with this is that in the olden days, bonds paid 5-10% interest income to us while we own them. That's gone. We no longer get that income from bonds, and that's one of the main reasons that we foresee problems in the future with retirement income, or why so many people are struggling now with retirement income, because interest rates are so incredibly low. So moving forward, how will that play out? And that's, I guess, one of the things that led us to create alternative income streams, because the income is just not there that used to be there for retirees to be able to pay their bills from interest that we would get from bonds as investors. So what you want to do is look and see how much interest income or other income, dividend income, any type of income you would get from your investments. Don't confuse this with capital gains, which may or may not happen. Capital gains occur when the value of your asset goes up. That may or may not happen. It usually does happen, fortunately, but it doesn't always happen. What I'm referring to is strictly income. And what you'll want to do is look at your 401k money and see how will I invest that. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but include that in your analysis. Don't just look at what you've got right now that you have in your regular accounts that you can access for income. Think about how much income you can generate from your retirement accounts, because we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. That's going to affect it because that is part of your net worth that you're going to use. I like to say that with my clients, we look at optimizing capital, right? So that we can get the most income and or wealth building from that, depending on what your specific goal is. Then compare that amount to how much it is that you want to spend every single month based on that earlier number of looking to see how much you're spending now, adjusting that for the things you want in your life as you get older, and see what the gap is there. There almost always is a gap, and see what that gap is. And the reason it's so important to do that in the years before retirement is that you can go ahead and start implementing some steps to get some alternative income streams or traditional income streams in place. But in general, we found that alternative income streams, given the low interest rates on bonds, were super important in this day and age. And also the fact that we simply didn't want to rely on dividend yields, which are so incredibly low given the amount of capital that is required to generate just a 2 or 3%, maybe 4%, 5% if you really go out in a riskier, higher dividend yielding stock. The capital that's required to do that didn't compare to some of the alternative investment income streams that we were looking at and that we have gotten into and or created ourselves. The main point being, with this step, you'll want to think about and start implementing or doing what you need to do in order to create another income stream or two if you have that gap. And you may be the sort of person that wants to work part-time or do some sort of consulting, or perhaps get some sort of certification so that you can offer a service or consulting. And that's something that you can go ahead and get going now. If you want to do something like build a website or content-based website, or do something like I'm doing here on YouTube, some sort of online property where you're building up a following and getting paid in some way to do that, then you'll want to go ahead and do that, because these things take most of them, not all of them, most of them take a year or two before they're generating any income at all. So I like to say and urge my clients to sort of follow their heart and do something that is related to what they enjoy doing after all these years of working and doing things that maybe you aren't so crazy about doing or that you would change if you could. We finally get to focus on generating some income, doing something that we enjoy doing. And it may have nothing to do with alternative. It may be more about increasing your investment returns so that you can count on a higher retirement withdrawal. You can figure out what it is for you. The main thing is to go ahead in those years leading up to retirement and sort of see how you want to live, how much it costs, and where you are now in terms of the income you'll be able to generate from your investment savings, both the money you have in your retirement account, and such as a 401k and IRA, and or your regular accounts. The next step is to start thinking about when you'll want to take Social Security if you're an American citizen, as I am. Do you want to delay Social Security as long as you can so that you get higher payouts? Or do you want to start taking Social Security as early as you can? If you want to start reading up about that, you might want to consult with someone about that. Do a little online research. I found really good information about that. So start thinking about how much you can count on from Social Security, because that will be an easy foundation for you as far as income, and then that will tell you what that gap is you need to fill with that prior step that I mentioned. And then the next step, these aren't in any particular order really, you may want to do this earlier, that's to go ahead and start looking at your 401k, if you have one, to see what your options are, moving that for cashing it in for a lump sum or moving it to some sort of Roth, and what sort of options you might have once you do move it. You want to be able to have options unless you already know how you want to invest that money. But a lot of people that I see with this situation aren't able to invest the portfolios that they want to invest. I do a lot of investing in ETF portfolios, and sometimes that can be very limited within a 401k. So start looking at kind of what are your options with that money, where do you think you'd want to keep that money in a tax favored account, how much of that money can you withdraw every year, what will that number be, and how do you think you'll want to invest that money. Those are the steps that I would recommend everybody take in the years leading up to retirement. Remember, retire certain.